Okay. Hi, folks. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. I'm Car. I'm a bookseller here at Green Apple Books in beautiful San Francisco, California. Thanks for joining us today for our conversation with Leila Slimani and Lisa Taddeo. I wanted to tell you about a couple of events that we have coming up on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, July 21st at 5 p.m. Kate Green will be joined by author Mary Roach to discuss her new book, Once Upon a Time, I Lived on Mars, Space Exploration and Life on Earth. It's about the time Green spent as a part of a NASA experiment trying to recreate the surface of Mars on Earth, and she's talking to legendary, hilarious science writer Mary Roach, author of Packing for Mars. So should be very entertaining. That's next Tuesday at 5 p.m. And there's more information about our events on our website. I will say too, please do buy books if you can. It helps keep us, your kindly bookstore, in business. It supports these authors and it helps us host events like these. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's authors. Lisa Taddeo is an author and journalist whose work has appeared in New York Magazine, Esquire, and Elle, among many other publications. Her nonfiction has been included in the Best American Sports Writing, Best American Political Writing anthologies, and her short stories have won 2 Pushcart Prizes. She lives with her husband and daughter in New England, and she's the author of the New York Times bestseller, 3 Women, which was recently released in paperback. Congratulations, Lisa. And Leila Slimani is the best-selling author of The Perfect Nanny and Adele, for which she won the La Mumiam Prize. A journalist and frequent commentator on women's and human rights issues, she spearheaded a campaign for which she won the Simone de Beauvoir Prize for Women's Freedom to help Moroccan women speak out as self-declared outlaws against their country's unfair and obsolete laws. She is the French President Emmanuel Macron's personal representative for the promotion of the French language and culture, and was ranked number 2 on Vanity Fair France's annual list of the 50 most influential French people in the world. She lives in Paris with her husband and children, and her book, Sex and Lies, True Stories of Women's Intimate Lives in the Arab World, was just released. Please welcome Leila.
Hello, do you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Hello. Leila, I think are you gonna, I just want to, may I introduce the book since I've just have been.
Oh, do you want me just to read the extract?
Yeah, I think so, but let me start. I just want to tell people who,
Okay.
if you have not read Sex and Lies, I've read it twice now. I think it's beautiful. It is a haunting and beautifully composed book about sex and desire in conservative Arab culture. And the amount that I learned from it was just shocking. I thought I knew a little bit about female desire, but this was just, it blew my mind, and it made me feel really, just made me feel sad, but also excited that someone's talking about it, because it was just needs to be. And I think that it's going to help, in my mind, young Moroccan women trying to sort of balance what they want to be and do and what they're expected to do. And I think your book is just, it's going to, I mean, it already has in the French language, but I think in English, it's just going to be amazing for people to read. So anyway, please, I would love to hear an excerpt whenever you have, when you're ready.
When I was a teenager, everyone I knew could be split into 2 groups, those who were doing it and those who weren't. The choice for us cannot be compared to that made by young women in the West, because in Morocco, it is a political statement. By losing her virginity, a woman automatically tips over into criminality, which of course is no laughing matter. But making this choice is not enough. You have to be able actually to realize your wish, and the obstacles are legion. Where can lovers meet? At the parents' house? Quite simply unthinkable. At a hotel? Even those who might have the means, this is impossible, for hotels are known to demand a marriage certificate for couples wishing to share a room. So we found ourselves in cars, in forests, on the edges of beaches, on building sites, or in empty lots, and accompanied by the appalling fears of being found and then arrested on the spot by the police. I don't know if a 16-year-old European girl can really imagine the stress such a situation can present.
Beautiful. I wanted to ask you, the first thing I wanted to ask is, when it was originally published in 2017, right, in French, did it exceed your expectations of how it was going to be received, of the sort of the way that Arab culture, Morocco, was going to, did it exceed it in terms of worse or better than you expected?
I think, unfortunately, in terms of worse.
Okay.
Because I was attacked, of course, and I was attacked not only in Morocco but in France too.
Really?
I was attacked in France because a lot of intellectual of the left wing considered that I was Islamophobic, that I hated my own culture, and that I had a problem with being an Arab woman, and that writing this book was helping the right wing and the extreme right to fight against Islam. So they didn't want to have anything to do with me. And they were like, oh, you should respect your own culture. People are different if they want to have sex in a different way. And I was very disappointed, because for me, France was the country of universalism. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that rape is a culture. And I don't think that violence is a culture. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with any culture. And I think that anyone on earth has the right to ask for dignity, for justice, for equality. So yeah, I was very disappointed. But on the other hand, I was quite surprised that in Morocco, it was not such a scandal as I imagined, because even conservative people, you know, in the book, I tell the story of two conservatives, two figures of the Islamist movement, to an old man and an old woman who fell in love, and they were found in a car having sex, because he was a widow and she was a widow and he was still married, and they got arrested. So at that time, Islamist movement knew that the authorities were going to use sexual means and the sexual laws to stop them and to keep them from chasing power. So it was very weird, because I was, in a certain way, I was defended by people I'm attacking and people I'm fighting against. So it's always a paradox when you're when you're working on those topics. You figure out that your enemies are not always those you think they are.
That's really interesting. What about the U.S. in terms of when you published Adele here? Do you find it to be more patriarchal than you expected it to be? Like with this book, are you expecting it to be easier than it? Because France sounds like it was something that you weren't expecting. So how do you feel about the U.S. response in general?
You know, that's interesting, because in the past few years, I must say that I discovered something about the US, is that it's a very patriarchal country, much more than I imagined before. I've always thought that it was a very a country where women and men were equal, and women had every opportunities to do everything, and that maybe it was even more than in Europe. But the truth is that, and maybe it began with the election of Donald Trump and the way people used to speak about Hillary Clinton and the fact that she was a woman. And maybe what I'm going to say is going to shock you, and I'm not a specialist of the US, but I think that for Americans, it's even more difficult to vote for a woman than for a Black man. I think there is a real patriarchal mean in the US. And when I came 2 years ago for a big promotion tour, and I went on the different universities, it was the MeToo movement, etc. And I was quite shocked by the machismo, the fact that men were real macho, and by the patriarchal institution in everything. So I think it's a very patriarchal meme. But I don't really know now the reaction to the book because of the pandemics, etc. I don't really know. But when Adele was published, I remember that people were very surprised by the fact that a young Arab woman could publish something like that. And I remember in New York, a man asked me, but how is it possible? And I said to him, you know, Arabs have sex. maybe you're not aware of that, but
Yeah.
Arab people have a sexual life, and even though they are traditional in certain ways, or even sometimes archaic, they have desire, and they have a sense of eroticism, and they have sexuality. So of course we speak about that. We speak about that all the time.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I felt and noticed from your book was that, and I think it's true everywhere, but it feels very true. And I think you said it about writing Adele, was that people are shocked that a young Arab woman would do that. But at the same time, the amount of subjugation over talking about that stuff and having that desire at all is what would lead someone to be sort of, I mean, obsessed is the wrong word because it's sex and we should all sort of feel comfortable with it, but for someone to be able and want to put that much of, to really sort of shine a light on it. So I find that that's kind of an obvious thing, right? But it seems like people don't really see that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first question was always, okay, so that's you are Adele.
Yeah, right.
Always have this idea that if you are telling that, it's a way for you to confess and to say I have a problem. And it was very weird for me because this is a work of imagination, and I spent years working on this character and trying to build this character, and it's a character that is inspired very much by very classical figure of literature like Anna Karenine or Emma Bovary. And actually it reminds me a lot of the characters in your own book. When you say very at many times you say those women who wants more, and I think that very often women who wants more than just life, very often they are punished by society, because a woman is not supposed to want more. You're supposed to be satisfied with what you have, especially when you have a husband and children and a house. You're supposed to be very happy with that. And something else you're saying in your book is the idea that you can accept to lose everything just for having sex with someone, just for a desire. And desire is destructive in a certain way. So that's why we don't want women to feel this kind of desire, because a woman is not supposed to bring any destruction with her. She's supposed to be here to protect society and the clan and the family. So people were very much surprised, and I think that the majority of them didn't really understand who she was, because she is Adele is very shocking, but she's not just an infomaniac or just a sex addict. She's a bored woman. She's someone who's trying to feel something, and maybe that the life society offers to her is not enough. It's just too trivial and too sad and too boring. And I think that a woman who is bored is dangerous.
Totally. That's a great line. So I have to tell you, I read about I had never really explored it, but the hymen restoration and the hymen, the kit with the blood in it, I sort of went down a hymen restoration rabbit hole on the internet after reading that, because I was so fascinated by it. And what was fascinating to me was because I remember when I was when I was young and I heard a lot about the hymen, and we learned about it in the US more in a sort of scientific manner. But what I remember was that the hymen could be broken by tampons, it could be broken by all these things, and that doctors had said that it was not something that would be able to tell you whether or not a woman was a virgin. And yet, in many places, not just Morocco, et cetera, but they do the virginity test, right? And so what I found so intriguing by that was that that having anal sex is considered, and it's fine, but it's considered to be not losing one's virginity. And what I found so strange about, and I wanted to ask you about that, is that because the sort of having sex, the vaginal sex is because that's made for procreation, that would be a sullied thing? Is that what it is?
No, the truth is, I think that this obsession of virginity is so big and everywhere, in every social class, everywhere, that people are completely, they lose their mind about what is sex, what is the meaning of sex. The meaning of sex is love, pleasure, and consent. That's it. But when you are obsessed with virginity, when you have to think that for a woman, the virginity is like her capital. It's something
Mm-hmm.
she owns, and with
Yeah.
that, she's going to build something. She's going to marry. She's going maybe to marry someone who is rich and will give her a house and children. If you lose that, you lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
Your value is close to zero, and your family is going to consider that you're ashamed and that you put shame on them and on the whole clan and on the whole neighborhood. So the problem is that we don't really think of virginity as a, I don't know, even something little cheesy like a treasure or a
Yeah.
flower that I want to protect. It's not that. It's just virginity is something that keeps the power of my father, of the
Mm-hmm.
authority of everyone on me. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you are a teenage woman in Morocco, you are very conscious of something, is that you don't own your own body.
Wow.
My body is not mine. My body don't belong to me. It belongs to my father, and then it will belong to my husband. And at the end, it belongs to the government, because if they want to
Okay.
arrest me and to tell me, okay, we want to check if you're a virgin or you're not, they have the right to do that. If you're raped, for instance, you're raped by a man, and you go to the police and you say, I was raped, and he's going to say, what were you doing with the man? Oh, he was just a friend. Okay, so you had sex without being married? No, I was raped. It's exactly, for them, it's the same. So the problem with those laws is that there is no gray zone between
Yeah.
sex, rape, consent, etc. Everything, when it comes to sex and you're unmarried, everything is forbidden. And
Yeah.
so people don't think about pleasure, about consent, and even about your own respecting yourself, because a lot of women who were telling me, okay, I accept anal sex, or I do fellatio even if I don't want to. And I was like, but do you want to make love with him? And they were like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I want to, but I can't because I'm too afraid of losing that. And he's going to lose respect for me. And I was like, okay, you accept all this, but you think that he's going to lose respect for you. So yeah, it gives you a very, very weird and a very depraved vision of sexuality.
And you told that story about the young woman who is raped, and then she marries her rapist. Well, she has to marry her rapist, and that's considered okay. And then she commits suicide because that's all she can do is marry her rapist. And the idea of that, I mean, it was a shocking thing. I heard that before, but to read about that specific story was just shocking to me. And it's just the other thing I found really interesting in that level was the economics of it was so, if you are well off, if you come from a family in the sort of upper middle class, then it's, oh, you can have sex whatever way you want. If you have a car and a home, I think you said, or an apartment and a car, whatever it is, you can do what you want. But if you are poor and you have to do it in the streets or in some way that you can be caught. So just the idea of sort of that imbalance, an economic imbalance that's meant to sort of control so it's not just sexual, it's also socioeconomical control. And I found that really just hideous.
Yeah, of course. And in Morocco, sex goes with money, because you
Mm-hmm.
were speaking of hymen restoration. A lot of doctors, of gynecologists are doing that and are making a lot of money with that. A lot of gynecologists are doing abortions, illegal abortion, and making a lot of money with that, because men can't have sex with women who are not married. Prostitution, as you can imagine, is enormous. A lot of women have to do that. And women, for instance, who have sex and get pregnant, they have to flee from their family, and they go to big cities and they become prostitute because of that. So sex and money are all the time, they are linked. When you are like me, from the upper middle class, and you have the money to give to a policeman who is going to arrest you, when you have a car, when you have a house, when you have a passport, so you have the possibility to go to Europe and have an abortion or something, of course your life is very different from a woman living in the mountain or living in a small traditional town. And the truth is that a lot of people in Morocco said to me, but you never had really to face that, and you come from the upper class, so that's okay for you, so why do you really want to get involved in this? And that's exactly for that, because I felt so ashamed when I was arrested for the first time and I gave money to this policeman, and I was like, okay, for me it's okay, but what is happening for other women when you don't have this to give? What do you do? What do you do? So I was obsessed by that. I was haunted by that, but by what other women have to do to get rid of this policeman. And the other thing is, you were speaking about this girl, Amina Filali, who decided to kill herself when she was 16. So she was raped. And then she told her parents, and her parents said to her, you have to marry your rapist. And she married him, and she killed herself. And that was for me the beginning of my fight in Morocco. And the big problem is, and it's difficult to understand in Western societies, in our societies, the individual don't exist. The community is important. You as an individual, you don't exist. You're nothing, especially when you're a woman. You have always to think first about the group. What wants the group? What the group is going to think? How is going to look at you? Is it going to respect you, etc.? There's only the group. So you're always on the eyes of someone. You always have the feeling that people are looking at you, judging you. And I remember, I think it's the character of Sloane in your book. You say they talk about her. People talk about her all the time. And I was like, yeah, in Morocco, imagine that very, very big. People talk about you all the time. She was here, she did that. So it's very difficult not to have the possibility to be an individual and just to say, it's my life, it's my destiny. I'm going to make my choice. I'm probably going to make some mistake, but can you forgive me? Can you just try to understand me? Can you try to have compassion? It's very difficult.
And is it more the father or the mother, or is it both, who kind of who are sort of the moral authorities in terms of a young woman upholding the sort of things she's supposed to uphold sexually?
It's changing now. I must say that it's changing now because of the fact that a lot of women in Morocco now goes to universities, and they are well educated and they work very well. The majority of doctors, lawyers, PhDs, etc. are women, because women, they stay at home. They don't have the possibility to go outside and to go to the cafe and spend time with friends, so they study. And I spoke to a lot of women who told me, I know that the only way for me to emancipate myself, to have the possibility one day to have a house of my own, etc., is to study. So now I see a lot of fathers, for example, who says, I'd rather have a girl than a boy, because a boy is a lot of problem and is going to go out and he asks for money, and a girl, you're going to be proud of her and she's going to help you even to elevate in terms of social class. So now it's very different, and I think that there is more trust towards women than before, when I was a young girl. I think that it changed a lot. And of course, I think that the big problem of patriarchy is that as women, we can't really be complice to one another. We are educated, and we are meant to be in sort of opposition. My mother always tells me that when she was a young girl, her mother always tells her, don't wear that, don't do that, don't go with a man, stay a virgin, don't get pregnant. Because as a mother, she had to do that because her girl was in danger and she had to protect her. But the relationship of my grandmother and my mother was not a very nice relationship as I'm going to have with my child, because I'm not going to say that to my daughter, or not in the way my grandmother used to say. So I think that, what we have to fight for as feminists is this possibility for women and for a mother and her daughter not to say that all the time, and to be all the time in this idea that sex equals danger. That you can talk about sex and talk about pleasure and tenderness and trust your daughter and trust also your son.
Yeah. Do you find that women do you find that women are more judgmental of other women in Morocco, or is it men, or both?
I think both, but I think that men are more cruel. They are very cruel because they take you, and once they've taken you, they're like, oh, she's a whore. And you're like, yes, but she's not a whore because it just appeared like that. She's a whore because you decided to have sex with her and now you're judging her. I think that women are, more compassionate because they know that in their own heart, in their own body. They know how men are cruel and sometimes unfair. And you were speaking about virginity. There is this simple fact: you can't prove the virginity of a man. And there is this idea that the body of a man, it's not the same, a man, you will never know. There is no stigma on the body of the man. And also the idea that the man, he needs to have sex, he needs to relate. There is something like that. A woman is not the same. She can control her desire, and she can even control the desire of the man.
Totally.
So that's also the big problem. So we have this burden on our shoulders, even when we are little girls, mothers, grandmothers, the aunts. They're all telling us, men are pigs. So you have to be very careful because they are pigs. And I think that's a very bad consequences of the patriarchy, because they tell you have to wear a veil because men are pigs. And I'm like, no, I don't believe that men are pigs. You should stop saying that and stop raising your boys telling them they are pigs. And I don't want my son to be a pig. So as a feminist, for me, it's also a fight for stopping telling boys that they are pigs and they can't control themselves. If we can control ourselves, they can too.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a line in the book that says that men are not our enemy, in the sense that what you just said, it's our enemies are, the sort of patriarchy just continuing the sort of, the hangover. And one thing I found in my own research was that after Me Too, it did not feel like, even though women were finally being able to say what they didn't want from men, I think that they became even more judgmental of one another, because now it was like, we have to all be in this place where we're not letting, men can't do that, men can't do this. But then those same women wanting different kinds of men or wanting different kinds of careers wasn't okay. So my question is, did you find that Me Too, I guess, I don't know, in France, for example, did you find that Me Too created, because you guys had a couple of situations with women in France so how did that sort of land on you in France?
I agree so much with you with this idea that we became even more judgmental. First of all, I have a problem with this word in English, empowerment. This idea that we have to be empowered all the time.
Right.
Because if you translate that in French, it has to do with power in the terms of domination.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that every woman wants to have power or to, and we should have the choice not to have.
Yeah, that's power. To choose.
That's power. It's the choice.
Yeah.
And a character like Adele, she's a woman who doesn't want to be a subject. She wants to be an object. She wants to be fucked.
Yeah, that's
and
okay.
She doesn't want to work, and she wants a man to be rich and to take care of her. But now you can't say that, because if you say that, you're a bad woman. You're a bad feminist. But for me, being a feminist is accepting every kind of desire, even very weird, even those you don't understand. Totally. And I'm not sure that, I think that sometimes when you read, for instance, feminist book for children, for young girls, you have the feeling that we want to raise girls as we used to raise little boys before. You're going to have power, and you're going to conquer, and you're going to be strong, and you're going to... No, you're not going to be this or that. You're going to be whoever you want to be. And I think that we should give the opportunity to everyone to invent ourselves. I don't want people to tell me who I am. I want people and feminism to tell me that I can be whatever I want to be, but not to decide for me. So yes, I think that we are very judgmental. And the other problem is this idea now that you're a real feminist and you understand feminism when you are a victim. That
totally.
Victims are the only one who have the legitimacy to speak. Yes. And I think it's a problem. I think it's a big problem, because there is now this idea also that victim equals hero. Of course, totally, I have a lot of I have a lot of compassion for victims, but I think it would be a mistake for feminism to be built only
Yeah.
on the pathos and this idea of victimology, as we say here in France. And it's not because you're a victim that you're a hero. That's not true.
Yeah.
Even if it's maybe what I say seem cruel, but I really think that. So that's the problem for me now with feminism.
Yeah. And what about in Morocco, has the Me Too movement landed in a sort of a way?
Yeah, not as huge as in Europe or in the West in general. But I think that it was important for two things. The first one was that a lot of people in the Muslim world were very frustrated by the fact that people from the West looked at them as, oh, you know, the Arabs, they are so traditional and they have a problem with sex and they are violent and they are rapists. And for them, it was a way to say, oh, okay, so now you see that being a rapist is not a cultural matter. You're not a rapist because you're a Muslim. You're a rapist because you're a criminal and you're
Yeah.
a man and you belong to a patriarchal society. And I think that everyone discovered that patriarchy is very universal and you can be American or French and be a very violent man. So I think for a lot of women and men in Morocco, it was like a relief to say, okay, it's not just a cultural matter. And the other thing is that it gave a lot of confidence, I think, to women, especially in the public spaces. Now, if you go to Casablanca or Rabat and a man is insulting you in the street or harassing you, very quickly you will see 1, 2, 3, 4 women around
Oh,
you, and
that's great.
women, they get together and they have the feeling that they can help one another. There is a certain sense of sorority, of solidarity between women that has changed, I think.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to hear. I want to say one thing because I want to ask you a question that I've been wanting to for before I knew that we were going to do this. But first, I just want to tell everybody that there's a Q&A box in case anybody wants to ask a question. I don't, I'm not really good at these things, but it says Q&A and it's the bottom of your screen of your Zoom, and I would love to invite you to do that so we can ask Leila questions that you may have. I wanted to ask about your short story in the New Yorker, The Confession, which is one of my favorites ever. And what I think is so, and it ties into everything you're saying here, but you took the point of view of a rapist. And to me, it was like the idea of doing that is amazing, but I also feel like that must have been something that in terms of what you're saying, we don't want to read or hear about things that are disgusting or that are wrong. And we think that if even just giving voice to them, like you said about what the French left and did to you, we even give voice to them, then we're making a crime against something that we're supposed to rise up from. And what I loved about that short story was that it was a 360-degree view of this human being, and he had done something wrong, but he was also understanding why. And by reading his story, I would assume that hopefully a man reading it would kind of have a little bit more of a, oh, okay, so they could see themselves in that because it wasn't a sort of evil man in the general sense. But what I think, well, first of all, did you get any sort of outcries about that?
Not really, no.
Okay, that's good. That's surprising because I feel like it's a very brave choice to make, and it was great. But I just wanted to say that going back to what you were saying, because I find it's difficult because I don't meet a lot of people in this country for sure. And as you said, the victims, I think calling women victims is victimizing. And I also think that calling all victims heroes and calling all it's just, the whole thing is it's just so troubled, and it's not really mature or complex.
Exactly.
And it's so interesting to me that we don't see that, and we just keep doing it. It's like it's just the safe thing to do, right? Do you think it's safe, or is there another reason people are doing it?
No, I don't really understand now. I think that's something I want to think about and I want to analyze. But for my short story about the rapist, The Confession, actually it came from the fact that I have a lot of friends, of female friends, and I'm sure it's the case for you and a lot of other girls. I have a lot of friends who were raped or who were in the situation of almost being raped. And so I heard so many stories about that, and I was thinking, of course I must know a rapist, because if I know so
Yeah.
many women who were raped,
That's so,
I must
yeah.
know a man who is a
Yeah.
rapist, because it's not, where are they? They
Yeah.
are not all in prison. I know
Yes,
that,
exactly.
because I know that 90% of them don't go to prison. So they are
Right.
here.
Yes.
Maybe it's the man in the restaurant serving me food. Maybe it's the man in the bookstore. It's just my neighbor. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I got obsessed by that. Where is the rapist? And I
Yeah.
want to hear what what he think about what he did. Is he conscious that he committed a rape?
Yeah.
So that's how I became obsessed with that. And one day I met a man and I began to discuss with him. And I said that. I said, you know, it's weird because I'm always thinking that I know a rapist. And he said,
Mhm.
yeah, I raped a woman one day. And
Wow.
he told me the story.
Wow.
And he told me that. And this man was very sick and he knew he was going to die. He had cancer. And he said, okay, I'm going to tell you the story and you can
Wow.
use what I'm going to tell you. And it was very confusing for me. But what was very strong is that I really believe him when he says that he didn't know that he's
Right.
committing rape. For him, this woman is not really a woman. She's an
Yeah.
object. She's
Yeah.
something people are offering her to him,
Yeah.
and he can take her because she's nothing. She's spoiled. She's dirty. She's a bad woman. So yeah, it was very confusing. But I think that as feminists, we need that. We need to see the other side
Mm-hmm.
of thing, and we should question ourselves about why men are speaking so few, because
Mm-hmm.
if you think about MeToo movement, it was like now 3 years ago or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
We don't really hear men. Where are
Yeah.
they? What do they think about
Yeah.
that? What do they think about what they do, about what their friends do? So yeah, I think that it's very good and very cool that we hear more female voice, and I hope it's going to be more and more. But maybe we need to hear some male voice about that also.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find that have men been interviewing you about the book, or is it more that they send women to do it?
They
Because I
send
feel that,
women to do
okay,
it,
yeah.
because I think that men, they feel very uncomfortable and they are
Yeah.
always, I don't think I'm legitimate to think
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
speak about that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel very legitimate to speak about men, and I could
Yeah.
write a whole
Right.
novel about men. So
Yes.
but that's confusing too. They
Yeah.
feel
That's,
shy for
yeah.
once.
It's funny because the conversations I've had with men have been some of the more interesting ones, or maybe because it's been so few, but it's just interesting because when they do feel comfortable, they want to know things like you're talking about that man who told you his story. It's like it's not okay for them to not know. It's not about that. It's about for us to not want to hear another side, for us not want to hear a male voice to kind of do the black and white. I just think it's going to get us back into, much like, the second wave of the pandemic, I think we're going to have a second wave of this.
Exactly.
And I just find that really interesting. And what you were saying about the rape, the woman being spoiled, and you said that, I think it was an editor of yours or a political commentator said that after a football match, that young people like to take their anger out on cars and women because there were two things that they owned, and they felt like they could just vent their frustration on them. And I found that it was an enlightening thing in a sense, and also kind of, it just made sense, the idea of ownership. And I think we still do that in the US. Do you in France, I assume you do, the incels, right? You have the incel
Yeah,
community.
not
Okay.
not as much as
Okay.
the US, I think, but we have, yeah.
And I find that so interesting because they believe, even though these men don't, and for anyone who doesn't know what an incel is, I think it's involuntarily celibate. Okay. So
Very angry men.
very angry men who think that they feel like they're owed sex, but at the same time, they're too sort of timid to go out and get it because they're not, they don't feel attractive, or they don't. And there's women out there that they feel like, oh, these women want to be with what is it, chads, which is
Yeah,
like a
exactly.
term for like good looking men. And why do they want to be with that guy? And so it's funny because for centuries, for all of time, men have wanted to be with attractive women who had child rearing hips and whatever the sort of mode of the time is. But now the idea that women might want to be with attractive men who have, you know, broad shoulders and are able to fight off the tigers and whatever, that we are these whores for wanting to do
They
that.
are superficial and
Crazy. Yeah. So I just wonder when it's going to stop. Do you think it's going to stop anytime soon? Or
Yes, I think so, because you know I spend a lot of times with children, and I spend a lot of time with very young people. And for instance, just my husband. The other day, my husband was at the swimming pool, and he came back home, and he said to me, you know, Leila, it was very weird because I was alone in the swimming pool with a woman, and I thought maybe she's afraid, maybe she's scared,
yeah.
because she's alone with a man in the swimming pool. And he said, for the first time in my life, I was conscious of the fact that as a man, I've never experienced this kind of fear. I was never afraid just because I'm with someone. And so now I can really see that men have this kind of thought that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
That they are really, I think that they really understand that there is a problem with being a woman, that it's not that easy being a woman, that just being outside, that you have to think, because before you get out, what I'm going to wear, can I wear this skirt because I'm going in this kind of neighborhood, and maybe I'm going to go late, so I can't take the subway with this skirt. And so it's changing a lot. And my son, for instance, when I see the way he reacts to misogyny or to how people can speak about girls, he loves to wear pink, and he wears pink all the time. And I think as a political statement, maybe. And one day, one of his friends said, you're wearing clothes like a girl, you're like a girl. And he looked at him and he said, you know, being a girl is not an insult. And I'm very proud if I look like a girl. And I think that even me, when I was a child, I couldn't have said something like that because I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the education for that. So yeah, I want to have hope, because I think that when you fight, and I fight in Morocco against those laws every day, when you fight, it's a duty to be optimistic, because if you're not, you're telling people, okay, you're going to win. I think I'm not going to win. I think that there is no hope. I'm pessimistic. So what's the point of fighting if you don't believe you're going to win?
True. That's a very good point, because I've probably I've skewed negative myself. So it's really good to hear that. Thank you. And also the other line that not other line, there are 1,000, but one of the things that that I loved was, we still need to invent a woman who belongs to no one. And I think that's so, that was another sort of striking idea for me, that the sense of belonging, and I think in the US, we don't have that problem anymore, really. I think we're okay for the most part, at least and that's the other thing. I think in the larger cities, it's completely different. And I'm sure it's very much so in France. And, you know, when you're in Paris, when you're in New York and LA, we don't have the same, it's like they're different worlds. We don't have this, we look at people in the middle of the country or in smaller villages, and we look at them, we don't understand how they're not on the same level as us. And I think that, not level, but how don't you know that you're supposed to not want that? Don't you know that you're supposed to? And I think that's so, it's just so haunting to me that I think as a whole, we're still not really listening to each other at all. We're just talking at each other, which I think is, at least in this country, a reason for a lot of the sort of political issues that we have, is not listening. But the thing that I noticed too is, when the women you spoke to, sorry if I get the pronunciation wrong, Mona, is that right?
Yeah.
So she was judged very terribly, but she also did not seem to judge others. And so that's what I wanted to ask you. Do you feel like those who are judged are less likely to judge others?
Probably. And I think that when you experience that, the violence of the judgment, and the arbitrary of the judgment, and how much this judgment can be unfair, and even if it's unfair, you suffer of it, and everyone believes it, and you feel so lonely. That's something I experienced as a child. I remember the first time I was judged by someone. It was probably at school, and it was not true, and it was unfair. And I think that's exactly why I decided to become a writer, because I was like, it is, for me, it is unbearable, this idea of being judged and being put in a box.
Yeah.
And people don't understand you, and you're screaming, I'm not that, I'm not just that, stop thinking that I'm just this thing or this. So yeah, that's why I write, because I want to restore the dignity of people. I want to give them a chance to be more than what people think they are. And I think there is a terrible violence in the way people judge us and reduce us, and especially when you are a woman. I think in the kind of society like Morocco, people judge you a lot, and the words are very, very strong and very, very violent.
Yeah.
I'm going to put some light because it's night now in my country. Sorry. Now
Yeah.
Oh.
So bright. Yeah, I found that the sort of judgment that we levy upon each other is just so. So anyway, in my own research, I found that the women who get judged don't so much judge other people, and I think it's because you know how terrible it is. But I think that, I don't know, I guess what do you think, you've published in so many countries now, which do you think are the least judgmental countries, the ones that are the most open?
British people.
Yeah,
I think
I find that too.
Very, very open.
Yeah.
They are very open, and they are not so interested in judgment. And
Yeah.
I think that's also because this is a real civilization of literature. They have this bits of literature. And I would say France also. In France, you can write absolutely whatever you want. You can say a lot of bullshit even on TV everywhere, and be very provocative, and people are going to laugh, and are not judging so much. But I would say British people are not that judgmental. I like them very much.
Me too. That's funny, because I always say, I'm like, feel like people have called the women that I wrote about names, but in the UK, never. And I always feel so welcome there. And I've joked that I might want to move there just because it seems like,
Okay, let's go together.
Let's go. No, I would love that. But I also want to go to Paris. So there's a lot of things that I want to live in a lot of other places. But
we are waiting for you here. Everyone is talking about your book, so we are waiting for you.
Thank you. Well, I want to invite, since it's getting late in Paris, I don't want to keep you, but I want to invite people to just, if you want to ask a question in the Q&A box. I would love to hear other questions. I feel like I've asked her a billion, and I don't want to take up too much time, but yeah, I mean, in the meantime, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, just to go backwards for a second. In the I think it was 9,000 or so children who were abandoned, right, a year. And that made me feel like, I mean, did you watch Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
Okay, so it just made me feel like so much of Game of Thrones sounded like it was based off of a lot of that kind of Moroccan, not Moroccan necessarily, but that culture where it's just, lives are just so not, they're just so expendable. And I just felt, sorry, go ahead.
No, but this problem of children and of abortion, it's the biggest fight for me. And a few months ago, I published a tribune in a French newspaper and a lot of Moroccan newspapers, saying that I was an outlaw, that I got an abortion, and that I'm having sex without being married, so that I was a criminal. And now with a friend of mine called Sonia Terab, and she's a filmmaker and a very famous writer in Morocco, we decided to create this group of outlaws, and we were joined now by 25,000 people. That's how we win. yeah, and the group we won the Simone de Beauvoir Prize. And so now with the 25,000 signature, we have the possibility to change the law, or to make a proposal to the government and to the parliament to change the law. So now we have this little hope that maybe we're going to change this for abortion, because abortion is 600 women per day who are having illegal abortion in very dramatic, tragic condition. As you can imagine, a lot of women dying because of that, a lot of children of newborn abandoned in garbage. And when you go in little cities in Morocco, very often you can find a baby in a garbage. That's really, really terrible. So for me, it's the biggest fight today. And for us women in Morocco or in other countries, it's very, very sad and very difficult when we see that in big democracies like America or even in Europe, people are saying that they are going to change the laws about abortion and that they are going to forbid abortion. For us, it's so terrible to hear that, because we are still fighting just to have this right, and this right for us is everything. So yeah, please be careful with what you have, and cherish it, because it's very, very important.
So we have a question from Julie. Where do you think the most progress in Arab women's lives has occurred in the past year, and where has there been the least?
Where I would say, you mean in terms of countries or in terms of field?
It's Julie's question. I think it says in Arab women's lives.
In Arab women's life, I would say education. Women are much more educated than before. When I was a child, 70% of women in Morocco couldn't read or write. 70%. My grandmothers couldn't read or write. So today, I'm speaking with you in English, wrote a book, and my grandmother, she can't write her name. So that's the biggest change. And as you can imagine, it has a lot of consequences. Also, public health, because women now can have the pills, contraceptive pills. So in every countries of the Arab world. So it changed a lot. In the time of my grandmother, a woman would have like 6 or 8 children. Now they have 2. And the other big change is privacy. Before, a woman would live with her parents and her brothers and sister and her husband and the children and the cousins. And now people are living in more what we call the nuclear family, just the husband, the wife, and the children. And it changes a lot because you don't have the same social pressure.
Yeah.
But so the worst, I would say that it's poverty, inequality. Inequality are bigger than before, and women are less protected than before. Because before, through the family, exactly what I was saying before, you were living in a group and everyone was taking care of you. Now women are much more abandoned and they can be very lonely. And when you make one mistake in your life, you can be rejected completely from your family, from your house, etc. So yeah, I would say that.
And what about countries? Where has there been the least and the most progress?
The most, Tunisia, of course. It's the best in terms of all race education. They have the abortion, they have the right for abortion. They are now changing the law about homosexuality. So yeah, Tunisia is very, very important for us. We had a lot of hopes about Egypt, and Egypt is a wonderful country that I love, with a wonderful history of feminism in the 90s and the 30s. In Egypt, you had very, very important figure of feminism, very strong and glamour woman who fought for the rights of women all around the world. And now it's very difficult because of poverty and because of religion. The truth is, because we didn't speak about religion, but now Islam has completely changed. The Islam I used to know when I was a child is very different from the Islam that exists now, that comes from Saudi Arabia, and with a lot of money and with a lot of political pressure. They went in Morocco, Algeria, everywhere, and we were colonized by this terrible Islam that is an Islam without culture, that is no open-minded at all. It's terrible. We are losing our own culture and our own tradition to this.
Yeah. I mean, this has been, reading the book was just jaw-dropping, and also made me feel good in a sense that this is being talked about, and the things that you have done for Arab culture and sexuality and desire is just, I only know a little bit of it, but it's just so inspiring to me, and it's been inspiring to talk to you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, Gar.
Oh, you're doing great.
Go ahead. No, please. Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to thank you both so much. It's such a privilege to hear you speak and both of your insights. It's truly, truly a pleasure. So thank you for joining us. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Just wanted to say once more that these are definitely both books that should be on your shelf or in your hand somehow. They're truly great works, and I do hope you pick them up. And unless either Leila or Lisa, you have something to say, I think we're good for the evening.
Thank you, and have a nice summer, and kisses from Paris.
Yes.
Thank you.
And from
have the right and wear a mask.
Yes, wear a mask. Stay safe. Wear a mask, and yes, stay safe. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.